Hi, I'm Lauren Mitchell, born and raised in Ohio. For as long as I can remember, I was the fixer, the planner, the quiet foundation they all stood on without a second thought. My role in the family was as clear and unspoken as the fact that the sun would rise in the east. I was the support beam, designed to be strong, silent, and completely out of sight. I held things up so they could live in the light. But nothing prepared me for the night my mother smiled at me and said I was merely tolerated. That moment didn't just shatter something in me. It lit a fire they never saw coming, a fire that would burn the whole rotten structure to the ground. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me, where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing how far this story travels. It happened at my parents' house during one of those obligatory Sunday dinners that were marketed as family connection, but always felt like a performance review where I was destined to fail. The air was thick with the smell of my mother's over-seasoned roast chicken and the cloying sweetness of her perfume. My sister, Elise, sat at the head of the table, a position she naturally assumed. Her voice, bright and theatrical, dominated the room as she recounted a story about a minor inconvenience at a high-end spa that she'd spun into a heroic saga. My father hung on her every word, his eyes shining with a paternal adoration that, in all my life, had never once been directed at me. I sat at the corner, a satellite in their solar system, pushing a solitary green bean around my plate, feeling the familiar chill of invisibility. I tried to join in, to prove I was there. I got the quarterly numbers finalized for the Henderson project on Friday, I said into a brief lull. My boss was really impressed. My father grunted, a non-committal sound. That's nice, dear. His eyes immediately flicked back to Elise. So, the manager finally gave you the full refund? Elise laughed, a sound like tinkling bells. Of course. Daddy. He knew who he was dealing with. That was when the final blow came, quiet and deadly. My mother, noticing my attempt to contribute, turned to me. A placid, almost pitying smile touched her lips. Her voice was soft, a conspiratorial whisper meant only for our end of the table. We barely tolerate you. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't born of anger. It was delivered with the casual, devastating honesty of a weather report, a statement of fact. A few cousins sitting nearby chuckled nervously, their eyes darting away, desperate not to get caught in the blast radius. My father glanced over, his expression utterly unbothered, before turning back to Elise. To them, it was just another line in a long-running play, a familiar jab at the quiet, serious daughter. But for me, it was the sound of a key turning in, a lock, sealing me out forever. It was the last straw on a back that had been breaking, vertebrae by vertebrae for 28 years. I was always the outcast, the spare part in the family machine. Elise was the golden child, destined for a life of ease and admiration. I was the responsible one, the steady one. When our parents' finances hit a rough patch after Dad's business venture failed, it was my salary from my grueling accounting job that quietly filled the gaps. I remember one specific night, the rain lashing against the window of my tiny apartment. I was eating instant noodles for the third time that week, staring at a bright red payment overdue notice for my car insurance. My phone rang. It was my mother. Lauren, honey, the mortgage is due tomorrow. We're just a little short this month, she'd said, her voice laced with a practiced helplessness that grated on my soul. You know how things have been. I looked at my own bills, at the life I was barely holding together. A voice screamed inside my head, say no, for once, just say no. But the years of conditioning, the deeply ingrained sense of duty, won out. I swallowed my pride. I'll take care of it, Mom. I transferred the money, watching my own meager account balance dwindle. The next day, I spent my lunch break on the phone with my insurance company, begging for a 1-week extension, feeling the hot shame of my self-inflicted poverty. They never asked how I managed. They just cashed the check. When my dad needed extensive surgery on his knee, my role as caretaker was assumed, not requested. I took 2 weeks of unpaid leave. I was the one who drove him to the pre-op appointments, who sat for 6 hours in the Stark Hospital waiting room, and who learned from a tired nurse how to change his dressings without making him wince. For a month, my life was a cycle of cooking bland, soft meals, cleaning their house, and managing a complex schedule of medications. Elise would breeze in for 20 minutes once a week, dressed in a fashionable coat that she refused to take off, complaining about the antiseptic smell. "Ugh, hospitals are so depressing," she'd sigh, checking her phone. One evening, I was sitting by my dad's bedside while he drifted in and out of a painkiller-induced haze. He opened his eyes and looked at me, a soft smile on his face. "You're such a good girl, Elise," he murmured. "Always here for your old dad." Before I could correct him, his eyes had fluttered shut again. I just sat there, the incorrect name, hanging in the air, a perfect summary of my entire life. My biggest financial mistake was, of course, Elise's business idea. She'd descended upon my apartment one evening, armed with glossy printouts and manic energy. It was a subscription box service for artisanal candle curation. I, the accountant, saw the immediate, glaring flaws. There was no profit margin. Analysis? No marketing budget. No supply chain logistics. I tried to offer practical advice. "Elise, the shipping costs alone will eat up half your revenue. Have you sourced your suppliers?" She'd waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Lori, don't be so negative. You have to think bigger." When I was still hesitant to provide the $10,000 she was asking for, the parental pressure began. "She's your sister, Lauren," my father had said in a phone call, his voice dripping with disappointment. "It's a brilliant idea. You're just jealous because you don't have that kind of creative spark." The words, selfish and jealous, were the weapons they always used against me. I wrote the check feeling like a fool. The business imploded in less than 6 months. The money was gone, and no one ever mentioned it again. And that brought us back to this dinner. To Elise, preening in a diamond necklace I now recognized. It was from a jewelry store website I'd had open on my laptop just last week. The necklace I had been saving for, a quiet reward for myself. She must have seen it. She must have known. She was wearing my dream around her neck, a dream she'd funded with my loan, and passing it off as the fruit of her brilliant investments. That's when my father raised his glass. "To Elise, the family's great hope. Smart, successful, and beautiful. We are so proud of you," he boomed. The cheer that went around the table was deafening. And then came my mother's whisper, the final, fatal shot. "You should be grateful. We even tolerate you." The laughter that followed was a physical force. It pushed the air from my lungs. "Excuse me," I mumbled, the words thick in my throat. I pushed my chair back and walked away, the sound of their merriment chasing me down the hall. In the cold silence of the guest bathroom, I gripped the edges of the porcelain sink, staring at the stranger in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a pain so profound it felt like a genetic inheritance. A lifetime of memories flooded me, each one a small cut that had finally bled me dry. Christmas, age 8. I got a practical set of encyclopedias while Elise got the life-size dollhouse I had prayed for. My high school soccer final, age 17. I scored the winning goal, but when I looked into the stands, my parents were on the other side of the field, filming Elise's cheerleading routine. My college graduation, they left my party early to take Elise to a concert. It was never one big betrayal. It was 1,000 tiny dismissals, a slow, methodical erasure of my worth. The tears that came were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. I wasn't just crying for the hurt. I was mourning the fool I'd been for so long, the person who kept trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. But as I watched the tears streak down my face in the mirror, something shifted. The trembling in my hands ceased. My spine straightened. The woman in the reflection was no longer a victim. Her eyes were clear, cold, and resolved. I took one deep, shuddering breath and let it out slowly. I whispered to the reflection, a vow so quiet yet so powerful it shook the very foundations of my soul. Never again. That night, I didn't sleep. My apartment, usually a refuge, felt like a command center. I made a pot of strong, black coffee and pulled out my financial folders. For years, I had maintained joint accounts with my parents and Elise, a structure I had created for their convenience. It was my salary, my bonuses, my meticulously managed investments that fed those accounts. They saw it as an amorphous pool of family money. They had forgotten who the swimmer was. They had fatally underestimated the meticulous, record-keeping nature of an accountant who had been wronged. Spreading the statements across my small dining table, the glow of my laptop screen casting long shadows on the wall, I went to work. This wasn't done in anger. It was done with the cold, detached precision of a surgeon excising a tumor. With every click, I remembered the sacrifice it represented. The savings account I shared with my parents held over $100,000. As I transferred it to my personal trust, I remembered the vacations I never took, the old car I kept driving, the years I'd spent putting their comfort above my own. Next, the credit cards linked to my primary account. I pictured Elise in the Baum boutique, her hands full of expensive bags, and I froze the account. The automatic withdrawals paying her rent, her car payment, her endless stream of lifestyle subscription boxes, I canceled them all, one by one. I was not just reclaiming my money, I was dismantling the entire scaffold that held up their lives. With every completed transaction, I felt a physical weight lift. I was cutting them off, yes, but more importantly, I was cutting myself free. The first call came the next morning at 10:15 a.m. It was Elise. "Lauren, my card. It just got declined at Gucci. In front of everyone. It's mortifying." "What did you do?" she shrieked. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Elise," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. Then I hung up. Minutes later, my father called, his voice a low growl of authority. "Lauren, this is your father. There are thousands of dollars missing from the account. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's theft. We will." "Call the police," I let him rant, his threats echoing in the silence of my apartment. When he finally paused for breath, expecting me to crumble, I simply disconnected the call. For the first time, my silence wasn't a sign of weakness. It was my ultimate weapon. The storm finally broke that evening. I was at my desk, deep in concentration, when Elise burst into the office. She bypassed security with the sheer force of her entitlement. "There you are, you thief!" she screamed. The entire floor went silent. I stood up slowly. "Elise, this is my place of work. You need to leave." "I'm not leaving until you give me back my money," she shrieked, her face contorted. "You were always jealous of me. Dad always said you were the bitter one." With a sigh, I walked to my locked filing cabinet. I didn't pull out just one folder. I pulled out 3. I laid them on the large conference table. "Let's be clear," I said, my voice carrying through the quiet office. My colleagues were shamelessly watching, and for once I didn't mind. "This," I said, holding up a statement, "shows that every dollar in that account for the past 5 years originated from my payroll deposit." I then held up a signed document. "And this is a standard loan agreement for $10,000, signed by you, acknowledging the funds as a personal loan to be repaid. It is now 6 months in default." I watched the color drain from her face. My manager, a good man named Mr. Harris, quietly walked over. "Is there a problem here, Lauren?" "No problem at all," I said, looking directly at Elise. "My sister was just leaving." Mr. Harris looked at Elise, then at the documents, and his expression hardened. "Ma'am," he said to her, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Humiliated and exposed, Elise turned and fled. A month later, I closed on a small but beautiful home on the outskirts of Cincinnati. It had a garden and large windows that let in the morning light. The first time I walked through the door with the keys in my hand, the silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It was mine. I invited my one true friend, Sarah, over. As we sat on the floor of the empty living room, eating pizza out of a box, she looked at me. "It's about time, Lauren," she said, her voice full of warmth. "We've been telling you for years to do this." Having someone in my corner, someone who saw the truth, felt like a miracle. My old family tried to breach the walls I had built. The calls and texts were relentless at first. Then they trickled down to desperate voicemails. One from my father stood out. His angry bellow was gone, replaced by a strained, pleading tone. Lauren, it's Dad. The property taxes are due. We always counted on. Listen, your mother is a mess. We made a mistake. Please just call me back. We can talk about this. I listened to the message, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of something. Not pity, but a profound sense of closure. Their world was collapsing not because I had attacked it, but because I had simply walked away and taken the pillars with me. I deleted the message. They said they barely tolerated me. They never realized their entire existence depended on the daughter they saw as an afterthought. Peace isn't something you beg for from the people who hurt you. It's something you build for yourself, brick by brick. It's something you take back.